Christian parenting. So, you're having a baby.
I'm Craig Dennison.
And I'm Rachel Dennison. And today on So You're Having a Baby, we're chatting with a board-certified lactation consultant to talk all things nursing. This can be such an odd subject before having babies. I remember I was so freaked out and weirded out by breastfeeding. It makes me laugh now because it is literally like second nature after 2 babies. But prior to having them, I was legit freaked out by it.
So maybe to help normalize this topic of nursing and help you become more comfortable with what's ahead, we're having on Ame Odom, an international board-certified lactation consultant with over 8 years of experience in the breastfeeding field.
Ame is married with 2 beautiful daughters. Her passion for breastfeeding began when she was pregnant with her first. She enjoys helping new moms navigate their way through the challenges of beginning breastfeeding, as well as helping all breastfeeding families with any concerns that may arise. This is going to be an informational and tips-packed podcast, so grab a pen and paper. Let's jump right in. Well, Ame, thank you so much for jumping on with us today to talk all things breastfeeding. We are so honored you would join us. We know that you have so many years of expertise and so much wisdom and compassion for new moms who are starting this journey. So to start us off, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and what you do as a lactation consultant?
Thank you so much, Craig and Rachel. I'm just honored to be here and doing exactly what you guys are doing alongside so many others and just supporting young families and the need to grow their village in a way that is best for their family, which can be really unique from family to family. I am married to my high school sweetheart, Tim. We've been married for over 11 years. We live in a busy, loud house with a 10-year-old English bulldog who our oldest daughter will say is our first baby, and she's our second baby. She's 8 years old in the 3rd grade, and we also have a 3.5-year-old spirited little girl as well. I am supported and loved by my amazing parents, my sister, extended family. We have lots of friends and family in the Dallas area. So, yeah, we've been lucky during this time to kind of be able to see them here and there with being stuck at home and all that. But I'd say, I kind of like to dabble in things here and there, and I'll get sort of, I guess bored. Right now I'm into the hobby of bracelet making for some reason.
That's awesome.
I would have probably said, 6 months ago, a year ago, that I really enjoyed like home renovating, but we have basically renovated every space in the house since this COVID has started, and now I'm totally burnt out on it. I don't want to do another home project again.
I feel that.
I like movies. I like historical documentaries. I like being outside. I like talking to my neighbors. I like going on walks in the evenings. So that's a little bit of me really quick. As far as a lactation consultant, I have the honor to be just an intimate part of the care team, celebrating victories and overcoming hurdles and sometimes even crying with you in the room. So you can feel it coming on. And if a mama's crying, sometimes a daddy will cry. And then I'm like, oh no, if the daddy's crying, I'm definitely going to cry.
For sure.
It can be a really tough hour sometimes, but from the most standard to the most complicated, I'm just there and ready and hopeful to work alongside these parents to get to their goal.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, we'll see how the conversation goes, but I'm known to be a little bit of a crier. So
Uh-oh.
maybe by the end of this, we'll all be
Certainly.
shedding some tears if I'm the trigger for that. Well, Ame, I remember in this season with Rachel, especially pregnant with our first Wesley, There's a lot of conversation around this topic of nursing. And I remember with Rachel and even, our friends that we're really close with, there's this real strong pull and desire towards nursing. But maybe as we get into this topic, I know it's a loaded topic on a lot of levels, and there's a lot of facets to it. That's why we're so excited to have you as an expert in this, and love the way that you do the work that you do. And that it's not just factual, but you actually do that with empathy, even sharing the story of how you handle the people that you work with and celebrating and overcoming hurdles. So maybe to jump into the conversation, maybe share with us a little bit about the value of nursing and why you think that that's, something that's meaningful, knowing that it's also challenging at the same time, and why you see, or if you see kind of the pull towards that, especially with people in their, and that season of having their first baby.
Yes. In lactation certification, just like a nursing certification or medical doctor certification, you have to kind of keep continuing education and attending seminars and continuing to broaden your knowledge base and all of that. And I attended a Dallas area breastfeeding alliance seminar last year, and one of the speakers said something that has really stuck with me since then. And what she said is, when you change the way you look at things, things change. And I think for me, going into breastfeeding as a pregnant mom, the first time it was, I have no idea. I'm not really sure. I'm going to give it a try. And it really wasn't until I had my baby in my arms that I felt that desperate need and want, and I will do anything to make this work. And it's just so incredible to see how that changes, going into it, that expectation, and then how it adjusts, based on the outcome. And I think in the value of breastfeeding, I think that as a community, as a society, we have to choose our words so very carefully when it comes to outlining the value of breastfeeding. For all of the studies that we have promoting breastfeeding, it is just so important not to shame or devalue the immense love that a parent or a mama has for their precious baby based on the ability to or the desire not to even breastfeed. And I know that this is a podcast about breastfeeding, so please know that what I am outlining, I am, pro breastfeeding, but I am also a fully supportive member of your team should you not choose to breastfeed for whatever the reason. So with that sort of preface, choosing our words very carefully for you, for me, just for anybody, and making sure that we're not isolating those who cannot or just don't want to. For mamas, if we're looking at breastfeeding as, okay, tell me why I should breastfeed, we can point to numerous studies that tell us that for mamas, you're going to have a better postpartum recovery. You're going to have sort of long-term benefits, decreased risk of osteoporosis, decreased risk of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, ovarian breast cancers later in life. The breastfeeding, just because of the hormones involved, breastfeeding lowers the effects of mood disorders, anything from fatigue, depression, anxiety. So, as new moms, we're going to have some anxiety and some fatigue. But overall and long term and prolonged, we're going to have less if we do choose to breastfeed. And one last big thing is, it increases, it upregulates our inflammatory response. So what that means is that it's going to help us sort of fight against getting an infectious disease, helping us lose that baby weight. The list goes on. And then, continuing on to baby, the benefits there, it's just a complete and whole nutrition, multitude of defense factors, decreased risk of acute and chronic diseases, autoimmune diseases, later in life, obesity, diabetes, asthma. There's even some studies that, show that there's an increase in brain functioning of those babies who were offered some breast milk. There was a 2007 study, which again, might I add that the studies in the breastfeeding field are really behind. We need to get some money into these. We need to do some good research, some current research. But in 2007, there was a study that revealed that just 2 weeks of exclusive breastfeeding can decrease your baby's risk of enterovirus infections for up to 1 year. So
Wow.
even if someone says, I gave it my best shot, I did 2 weeks and that's all I could do, I'd say, oh my gosh, can you just fathom the amount of protection that 2 weeks gave your baby? Not, that this was a negative thing as far as 2 weeks goes. So that can help sort of lighten that mama's shoulders a
Yeah.
little bit. Um, Sometimes when we have preterm newborns, like if you have a premature baby, a baby that's born really early, benefits of breastfeeding just are incredible. Can really protect you, really help keep you alive, really help defend against big bad things that can wreak havoc on that preterm baby. So, uh, you know, there's definite benefits there.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I think for so many new parents, this is such like a wild and unknown topic. I remember going into it, I was like really quite freaked out by the idea of it. And I had friends who nursed, and I thought, oh, that's weird. Like, because I just could not even begin to fathom what it was like. And kind of like what you're saying, there's nothing like when you have that baby in your arms for the first time, it's like, all right, let's do this. Like, I'm ready.
Mhm.
Like, it's so cool. And I think that, it's hard too because you just really don't know what to expect, and it's something you can't get comfortable with until you actually get to start doing it. Yeah, and I know that I went into it with so many different huge expectations on myself and on the baby that it would just work out, and that some probably go in terrified thinking it's going to be the hardest thing they've ever done. Like, for example, one expecting mom that I'm friends with right now, this is her first baby, and she said to me, "What about breastfeeding makes it hard?" All I keep hearing is how hard it is, and I feel like that is like a big stigma about it as well. But maybe you could just help us understand why we should go into this openly with like broad expectations of what it could be like and with lots of grace for ourselves.
Right, exactly. I think, firstly, as a mom, answering that question begins with what was my overwhelming sense of wanting to provide breast milk for my babies, which, exactly like you said, is something that for me really didn't come until she was here and I was actually doing it. But even before baby comes, we have expectations of how things will be, labor and delivery, even before that, our baby
Yeah,
shower or
yeah,
labor and delivery,
totally.
interactions in the hospital, the hospital stay itself, the trip home, all of these things. We dream about these things as expectant mothers. And, that's one thing that now in the time of COVID, it's really a grieving process for those moms who have dreamt about this, for several years. And now that sort of, there's no hope for, your parents coming and greeting you in your hospital bed. So the expectation there is just really disappointed. But one of the hard things can be the disappointment of that unmet expectation. I'd love to go
Mhm.
back and convince myself to have no expectations at all.
Right,
And then
right.
maybe the hard parts of my journey as a new parent would have been easier to cope with. But unfortunately, we can't do that. We're doing it right now, you and I, just sort of talking about it and helping others prepare for the massive changes ahead. As far as breastfeeding goes, it can be hard on a ton of fronts. The actual latch may be hard to achieve, the awkwardness of the positions. It can be hard due to postpartum recovery. If there's,
Yeah.
emergencies going on, if mom gets really sick, a C-section or vaginal healing that may restrict, our ability to sit down or to lay comfortably. So pain,
Mhm.
you know, um, it's hard not to have continuous sleep. It's hard
Hmm.
to determine if baby's getting enough. It's hard to be sort of adjusting to all these new changes and not bouncing back to the old you like you imagined or that you anticipated. So I think the best thing we can do is just prepare to understand and accept that this is something that you have never done before. The outcome is totally unknown. You will need instruction. You will need guidance. And above all, you'll need that grace to allow yourself the time needed to become the amazing parent that you expected to be. And you will,
Yeah.
Hmm.
especially if you're choosing that village, correctly, which thank goodness we're able to choose our village. But you're not going to go pro right away. Expect that it's going to be a learning curve, and
Yeah, it's
allowing
good.
yourself that forgiveness and that grace to say, all right, not I'm not going to perceive that I know everything about this, regardless of the books and the classes and all these things that I've done to prepare. I'm just going to accept the advice and accept the instruction that I'm given when the time comes.
That's really good. Just the beauty of being open-handed with it, because like you're saying, it's something you've literally never done before, and you just have to have grace for yourself to stumble and for it to be harder than you expected or whatever. And like I know that I was sharing with you earlier, Amy, that I was able to nurse Wesley for a year, which was amazing. And I mean, it was hard at first. I had blisters. I mean, went through the whole shebang, and luckily it went really well with Wesley. But, Wells, our second, I went into it thinking I would do the exact same thing. And he was a completely different baby.
Mm-hmm.
And it went completely different than I expected. And there was a real process there for me where I had to really grieve my expectations of what I thought it would be like, feeling like a failure as a mom, all of those things. That was like a very real process for me. And I just even wish with Wells, I would have gone into it more open-handed and more grace-oriented with myself. And, thank God I was, the people listening will have heard our interview with Dr. Lewis. Amy works with Dr. Lewis at Pediatricians of Dallas. And man, Dr. Lewis was just the most grace-oriented person with me when I was trying to make that decision of when it was time to, start formula with Wells. And so just for all the moms listening, like really try. I know that and we've talked about this, trusting your gut, knowing what you want to go with and how you want to try and do things, but know that this really is trying. This is not like set in stone. I'm going to do this. This is what I'm going to do, period. You say, I'm going to give it a good old college try, and I'm going to do my very, very best for this baby, but I'm going to be open-handed about the way things actually play out. And I think that's honestly, it's setting you up for success no matter what, if that makes sense, with your birth plan, with nursing, with if you're going to try cloth diapers, like whether you're going to try the passy, whether you're going to, all the things. It's really the whole stepping into motherhood for the first time has got to be padded with so much grace.
Yes. Yeah. And what makes your family happy and healthy may not make my family happy and healthy. And I think, one thing that it's sort of our motto there is, working together to build that happy, healthy family. And sometimes even recognizing the benefits of breastfeeding. I've done exactly the same as Dr. Lewis. I've sat in the room and said, hey, it's me sitting here saying, yep, breastfeeding's great, but in this situation, I think that it's hurting us and we should maybe move away from it. And so you're absolutely right. And I think that when you have somebody on the other end that's that, well-known and very trusted pediatrician or well-known and trusted lactation consultant sitting there telling you, this is okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to do that.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Yeah.
that's all we need is for somebody to give us that support.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you had that.
Well, last question on kind of the expectations category before we jump into some practicals. Any thoughts that you'd have, Amy, around how to prepare the dad in this conversation around breastfeeding and nursing?
That's a great question.
Kind of the role of the dad and or husband in this and what that looks like as they're helping their wife, spouse get prepared for this, as well as in that season, especially in the first bit of this, as the whole family's kind of trying to figure out how this thing works. Any encouragement for the role of the father and the husband in this?
I feel like I've seen like I'm going to say like two separate like groups of dads, right? I've seen those dads that like want to be so hands-on and like, hey, will you show me how to hand express this milk with my wife? And then
that would have been Craig.
I've
That
had
would have
those
been
dads
Craig.
That would have been me.
And then I've seen, I've had the dads that are like, I'm going to step outside the room for just a minute. And honey, if you need anything, you just let me know. But which is, it's perfectly fine. I've been in this profession for as long as I have, and I think that my husband still is like, oh my gosh, please don't say the word breast or nipple. Yeah. And so, it really kind of depends on where are you at. Like, are you a healthy medium, or are you like more of a hands-on sort of gonna do it? And I'm not saying that dad in the waiting room is not hands-on, but in that regard, it may just be that I'm, a third party, and there's that, sort of transition that sort of needs to be made into, okay, the more I see breastfeeding, the more it's normal, right? Normalizing that. And for this dad, it may not be, he may have never seen anybody breastfeeding, or it's been just sort of, the breasts are more sort of a sexual anatomy for him. And so it's hard to sort of see where that comes in. So when I get into the room, it's really a matter of, okay, let me fill everybody out and see what's going on. But as far as preparing a dad, I don't know that I'm the right person to ask for that. I think in preparing a dad, I think that you just need to love unconditionally and just be ready to help whatever comes up. Now, when it comes to actually in the thick of it, when we're on the front lines, and I certainly have a bunch of tips for dad, but I think as far as preparing, I don't know that we can be prepared other than sort of the no expectation, like we already talked about it. It's just, it's a whole nother world going into it. So you kind of got to do it first. Preparing is really hard.
That sounds good. I love that idea of kind of just setting broad expectations for the dad to figure out what's most helpful to kind of know themselves, and maybe even use this as a trigger point for a conversation for a couple to kind of know themselves as well, and get a sense of what the season's going to be like as far as what their relationship is. And I love that you can kind of make create some openness there around the different ways that guys are wired, and the different relationships that they have, and draw a circle around all that and say, hey, this is good and healthy. Just make sure that you're on the same page as a couple. And I think that goal is of being supportive, whatever support looks like for you as a couple, is a really good one.
Yeah, Craig is funny. He's like a major learner. And so when we were pregnant with Wesley, he like read the whole Baby Wise book. He was reading like blogs on nursing, and like, I remember when we first got home from the hospital, I was having different kinds of like blisters or like a clogged milk duct or whatever. And Craig's like the one on Kelly Mom like website.
Making like a saline solution.
Okay, you need to put this on for this long and soak after your nursing, and then use the lanolin. And it's just so.
I think that's great. I think that's most men are like fixers,
Yes.
Right.
But when it comes to, the plumbing or the disposal, like it's just a different system here, and so I think that's great that you were,
so
hard at work to help get your wife some solutions. That's so sweet.
Yeah, I think that no matter what the dad is like, he can serve the mom and get her what she needs while she's nursing. And I just, for a plug for Craig, he did a very good job of that.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Okay, so Amy, let's move into some practicals. I asked lots of moms about questions they had regarding breastfeeding for a lactation consultant, and I was shocked. I could not have expected how many responses I got from like local Facebook mom groups and on Instagram and just my play group in general. So let's dive right in. This will be a bit of rapid fire, but feel free to give us any information you find important and take as much time as you want to. To the parents listening, you might want to grab a journal and a pen and get ready to take some notes, or just get ready to listen to it all over again. We are going to cover lots of your questions. So let's get started with the most concerning question that people have, I think, the most fear about is what is normal and what's not normal around pain. Because I can't tell you, even within the hospital stay, I had nurses tell me it should not hurt at all. And then I had nurses tell me, oh, it's supposed to hurt. That's how you know you're doing it right. I mean, I heard literally the whole like realm of reasons why it shouldn't hurt. So I would love if you could touch on that, and then how to know if you have a good latch.
Perfect. Yeah, we can transition into that one too. As far as pain, what's normal, what's not. Initial latch pain can be really high, and initial latch pain can last for about 30 to 60 seconds right when baby latches on, but it should significantly reduce after that first minute. Okay. Pain that's high and that lasts the entire feed is not normal, and that should certainly be addressed. Furthermore, nipples have a really rich network of nerves. Okay. So it's very important to say breastfeeding is not without feeling. Okay. But sometimes that's hard for us to identify if we've never done this before. But there's a fine line between feeling a baby sucking on your nipple and that sucking being rateable pain. So I think that's really important to note. You're going to feel this, okay? But it shouldn't be something that's lasting pain.
Right.
And then knowing that you have a good latch, again, is that just that. It should be pain-free beyond that initial latch. So after that 30 or 60 seconds, you should be nursing without pain, not without sensation, but without pain. And then confirmation of that milk transfer is also how you know it's a good latch. So we have that by knowing that we're having good weight gain, the baby is peeing and pooping adequately, and your breast is being sort of reduced. So it's fuller at the beginning of the feeding and then less full when the baby's done.
Yeah. And then you're feeling that like letdown, right? Is that when I'm trying to remember? It feels like it's been so long, but I forgot about that initial painful latch, especially in the beginning days. Because I feel like that didn't last past the first, I don't know, month or so, right? Like,
oh, even sooner than that. So
okay.
initial latch pain, and it's different for different people. You know, just like you mentioned, Rachel, in the hospital, you kind of got differing opinions on what was right and what was wrong. And so I think that really it depends on the consistency of your care, where you're getting your advice from, where you're getting your instruction from. But I would say it's significantly reduced and maybe even eliminated by about day 7, 8, something like that. As long as there's not new existing damage to the nipple, you know, depending upon that, you know, you mentioned you're in your situation, you had some blisters and things like that. So that would be something that would be a little bit more focused care on getting that nipple healed up. And your initial pain might have been a little bit longer, but in the grand scheme, I would say it goes away fairly quick.
And then is just that initial, you said 30 seconds. Does that go away once your milk lets down? I'm trying to remember.
So the reason why the initial latch pain is there is because the baby is sort of positioning your nipple in the hard palate, and the hard palate is no place for a nipple. Okay. And so until the baby learns to open their mouth really wide and get the nipple in that soft palate juncture, which is where it needs to be in the back of the mouth, it sort of has that sort of path of, oh, it's in the hard palate, it hurts really bad, but okay, now it's in the soft palate and I don't feel it hurting as bad. And so it usually doesn't have anything to do with let down, more just that nipple was in the wrong spot in the mouth and now it's in the correct spot in the mouth. And that's why it's so that's why it only lasts for, you know, a minute or less, is because the nipple gets to where it needs to be.
All right, so quick plug for something that Rachel and I are super excited about. Parents often feel the pressure to parent well, but life, especially right now, makes parenting well so hard.
This is why we are so excited to announce that we will be speaking at the online Perfectly Imperfect Christian Parenting event on October 23rd and 24th.
This completely digital event was designed for parents like us at a time to set aside perfection and receive the practical and spiritual help that we need in an easy and accessible digital format. And we're so excited to be able to be participating inside of this event.
The goal is to help you check perfection at the door or couch and become the perfectly imperfect parent God has called you to be.
So we're going to be doing a longer form talk around what this podcast is, and this idea of thriving with a newborn. Really excited for us to be able to kind of visually and in a lot of different ways share our story here and to be able to prepare you and equip you for what it looks like to engage in this season with a newborn really well. And in addition to our talk, there's going to be over 40 other short consumable talks giving you both practical and spiritual advice for some incredible speakers. Speakers like Aaron and Jamie Ivey, Mark Batterson, Jonathan Pitts, Nicole Zazowski, the Duck Dynasty crew, and many more.
Register today for this digital Christian parenting event at baby.perfectlyimperfect.org. You'll also find the link to the event in our show notes. We look forward to seeing you there.
One of the questions we got that was one of our main questions is how to make sure that the baby's getting enough food. I think that was like primary concern. Even Rachel was so brave and some of those things, even the challenges of going back and forth in the initial season. But the main concern we felt is how do we just make sure the baby's getting enough nutrition? So any thoughts or tips on how to know that that's happening?
I always tell parents, like, it's a real test of faith because you don't see that milk in the bottle and then the milk is gone and it's in the baby.
Right.
You sort of just have to trust that, oh my gosh, I guess this is working. I'm not sure. And you're not up to like deciphering that all by yourself. That's what we're here for. The lactation consultant, your pediatrician. We're here to tell you, hey, it's working. It's happening. We don't see any concern. You shouldn't either.
Okay.
But it can all boil down to frequency. In the very beginning, it's normal to feed, 8 to 12 times a day. That's in a 24-hour cycle. Timing is about 15 to 20 minutes per side. We know baby's getting enough, again, because baby's peeing, baby's pooping, baby's gaining their weight. Later on, they're meeting those developmental milestones. And so it's sort of we have to kind of collect little points of data in order to say, yep, you're getting enough. It's not just
Gotcha.
a one point question or answer. So
yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Another big concern that I think that moms who have had multiples now were like, make sure that you ask about this, was sleepy feeders and at what point you should be concerned when the children won't eat. So like when to like start stripping them down and put a cold towel on them, that kind of thing. Yeah, that would be the main question.
I think in the early days, a lot of times, depending upon their age gestationally, so, a term baby, 37, 38, 39, 40 weeks of gestation, below that time, bilirubin can be a real challenge. Feeding problems, breathing problems can be a real challenge. So usually that's something that we can kind of identify in the hospital. Even if you're born beyond the 37th week, you can still have bilirubin concerns. That's that, newborn jaundice,
Yes.
The yellowing of the skin. And that can really contribute to sleepiness.
Mm.
And so that's certainly something that you want to monitor with your pediatrician early and often as needed, just to make sure that that's being managed and that's getting better. Otherwise, the baby's going to have their eyes closed the majority of the breastfeed. I think in order to say, I can't keep my baby awake while they're breastfeeding, that's not the goal. That expectation should be adjusted. So we should say, if your baby is latched on, maintaining that latch, intermittently sucking and swallowing, that's our goal. I'm going to just know that my baby can't keep their eyes open during the entire feed. But then we can kind of go back a little bit later on to sort of those feeding cues, just the same as that you would have a sleeping cue. So undress the baby, turn the lights on, turn off your sound machine. Sometimes it's a matter of get a wet washcloth, wipe your baby down. I use the term baby torture techniques. Of course, we're not going to actually hurt the baby, but we're not going to just pet them softly and say, "Wake up, baby." We're gonna kind of tickle their ribs, tickle their toes, unswaddle them, all those things. So that's a good question. But I think just knowing your baby's eyes are going to be closed the majority of the breastfeed, that's a good thing to sort of keep in the back of your mind too.
That's so good. And for the dads listening, that's one role you can play. I became well-versed in baby torture techniques
that's true.
as a way that I could help the nursing process.
Because it's especially those nighttime feeds where I'm like, and it's in the early days where he has to get up and, feed every 3 to 4 or 2 to 4, really, depending on your baby. But oh my goodness, Wesley would just be so sleepy. We're like, dude, wake up.
That was the weird part, is realizing if he doesn't get enough awake and then get a full feeding, then he's not going to sleep. So it's like, we want him to get full so that we can all sleep.
Yeah. You're on the clock. You got to do your hard work too.
Right, exactly. Right. I'm like, if I'm up, you're getting up, kiddo. So a big, massive, important question that came through was, can I have wine?
I say yes, have wine.
All right.
Hallelujah.
In moderation and not super early. Most of the time, the first couple of weeks, we're kind of like, yeah, I want wine, but maybe not right now.
Yeah.
But let me know the information for when I'm ready to have it. So
Yeah.
the earlier the baby is, the more immature their liver is. And we should probably take it easy in the way of wine early on. However, there was a wonderful analyst that actually went to the trouble of making a chart that gave us information based on postpartum weight and how many drinks I can drink. And he whittled it down to the hour and the minute that we needed to wait in between our number of drinks and offering our breast milk again. And I have it laminated at my desk. But typically, and he was able to sort of give us a little bit of information in the way of how much can we have and what do we need to do in that regard. And it's typically 4 or 5 ounces, so 1 glass of wine, and we must wait at least 2 hours to offer our breast. So I always like to add, if at any time you feel the effects of the alcohol or the wine, it's most definitely in your breast milk, just like it's in your blood alcohol, just like the alcohol.
Yeah.
Like, we could see that in your, breathalyzer or a blood alcohol test. And so anytime you feel the effects of that alcohol, it's there and we should withhold, right? The old theory of pump and dump, you don't have to do that.
Okay.
If you have to get the milk out because you're really engorged and you feel the effects of your alcohol, that milk should probably be tossed, but you can also wait. You don't have to do something immediately. So the alcohol doesn't store, it doesn't stay in the breast milk. It goes away just like it goes away
Oh,
in your bloodstream. Mhm.
I never knew that. That is
Mhm.
good info for everyone listening.
Yeah. So if you're pumping and you're within that 2 hour mark, again, that's not something that you want to keep the milk. But after that, you just wait to nurse or wait to pump.
That's so helpful, Amy. Love jumping into kind of some of those practicals, getting some context. Maybe let's jump into some rapid fire questions about some of the main challenges people asked questions over. The first one that comes to mind for me, the people asked about, is this idea of cluster feeding. And I remember how tough that was for us as we got into
It's
that with
exhausting.
Wes. And his cluster feeding time frame was kind of right when I was getting home from work. And so I felt like I came home every day to like, is this your normal environment? And Rachel would be like, this is not normal. Like this 5 to 8 time frame window is crazy every time. And so maybe tell us a little bit about the idea of like cluster feeding and
Mhm.
signs of that and the challenges that come with that and ways to overcome those hurdles.
Yeah, cluster feeds are normal and can happen randomly and for a small window of time compared to sort of the 24-hour clock, exactly like you just said. You know, the majority of the 24-hour clock, it's going smoothly, everything's working fine, and then oh my goodness, all of a sudden everything just seems to fall apart. And as moms, we kind of think like that snowball starts to happen and we're like, what's wrong, what's going on, what can I do, how can I fix it? And I would say that there's nothing you can do. This is sort of part of the process. Let's just let the baby sort of get what they need to get to, whether that be demanding for more milk, a little growth spurt, or maybe just a bond need. The cluster feeds, like I said, they're short or often feeds for 3-4 hour time frame, and then you should see a resume back to your normal schedule.
Mhm.
If your feeds don't get back on track, if you're frequent feeding and not cluster feeding, not looking at this small wedge of the 24-hour clock, you're looking at, gosh, this has been hours and hours and hours, maybe half the day or maybe the whole day to where I just can't catch up. That's certainly something that I encourage you to reach out to your lactation consultant or your pediatrician. That could be an indication of an issue. But a cluster feed just here and there randomly, that's part of the process. We just power through it. We rely on our support, go outside, take a deep breath, little pauses, little restarts for you. Walk away from your baby for a minute or two and then come back to it.
Yeah, it's intense.
That's so good.
Yeah, for us, it looked like, at 5, Wes would eat, and then he wanted to eat again at 6, and then he wanted to eat again at 7, and then he wanted to eat again at 8, but then he would get back on his normal schedule. So just hang in there, moms. Just keep
Yes.
swimming.
It reminds me of there's a movie, Boss Baby, that my oldest
Yes.
watches. And there's a scene where the baby comes and the parents are running crazy through the house and the baby's crying and the mom is screaming, "Get that baby bottle!"
Yes, that's real.
It reminds me of that, to where it's like, it's just chaos. And then everybody hits the ground, running and trying to figure out what happens. That's why a reset and a restart is so important, whether that be walk outside and get a couple breaths of fresh air and then come back to it. Don't feel like there's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So that's funny.
That's so good. Okay, so another big issue that a ton of people, I feel like increasingly these days, are dealing with is like reflux and silent reflux. And I know that was a big issue with Wells, but not with Wesley. And so, love if you could touch on like signs that your baby might have reflux.
True reflux is a medical problem, and it may require medication. So if you're ever concerned about the possibility of your baby having reflux, you should certainly reach out to your pediatrician to get that addressed and maybe even have some further evaluation. But it can include painful feeds, painful spit ups, even weight gain issues sometimes. So I think that as parents, we wait for the baby to make their next move. And when we see that, oh, look at this baby, she's doing great, she's doing everything she's supposed to be doing. And now 3 weeks in, 4 weeks in, why is she fussy now, sort of randomly? And I feel like we try and reach for problems to fix or solutions to what we think are these problems. But I think that another expectation is that, babies hit this sort of stage to where they become fussy for no reason at all. It used to be called, or still sometimes called, colic.
Right.
I think I don't know what it is. Y'all probably do. Where there's a word purple, and PURPLE, each stands for a certain thing. So it's called the period of purple crying. And it basically sort of outlines like, hey, this baby may have a time frame to where they're fussy, and there's no reason why they're fussy. They're fed, they're clean and dry, they're warm. All of their basic needs are met, and I can't figure out why they're crying. It's just that immature nervous system. It's just this baby used to, trying to get used to being a human outside the womb. And so it's sometimes nothing is there to fix. It's just trying to soothe your baby however you can, safely, pacifier and rocking and swaying and swaddling and shushing, all these things that we try and kind of go through. True reflex is something that's pretty consistent. You're not ever really going to see that, baby kind of having a cool off stage. They're going to probably be pretty uncomfortable almost all of the time. So again, a medical issue that you should probably talk to your pediatrician about if you have concerns about that.
Yeah. If someone is like wanting and hoping to breastfeed and like they're going to just try it out, when would you suggest introducing a passy?
Oh, I'm probably one of a very few lactation consultants that think that you need to have a pacifier. Most of the hospital lactation consultants will, give you that big stare down if they see a pacifier in the room with the new baby. But I think a pacifier is certainly useful. Babies, as a voluntary reflex, that's the only thing that they know how to do, right? So that's their soothing. If the recommendation is let them suck on your finger, gross. I'd rather let them suck on a pacifier. And I think, in the back seat of the car, or if mom's in the shower, if you have a crying baby, of course, we know that their need is not to suck on this pacifier. We know that their need is to maybe eat or be changed. And until we can get that need met over the course of the next 5 or 6 minutes, it would be great to use a pacifier to help that baby calm down a little bit.
That's helpful.
If 75 times a day we put a pacifier in this baby's mouth, that's probably a little bit inappropriate, but that rarely happens. And I think that, there's studies for everything, right? There's studies that show us that pacifier use early on doesn't give the breastfeeding a lot of value. But then there's also studies that say that babies who use a pacifier have a reduced risk of SIDS. So I think a pacifier is great. I think if you're going to a hospital that's baby-friendly initiative and you know that they're that way, then bring a pacifier in your hospital bag.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they won't supply it, just FYI. That's really good to know. Another great question would be how to up your supply if you're feeling like maybe your supply is low? Do you have any just like good tips?
This can be a really deep subject. I think that if you're already producing milk and you want to boost your supply, if you don't have any health conditions, my go-to supplement is fenugreek. It's an herbal supplement. I sort of have an outlined protocol that includes fenugreek for moms who don't have, thyroid disease. That would be a contraindication to using it. But, making sure we're focusing on your maternal nutrition, hydration, stress level, diet, things like that. But fenugreek is a really good go-to.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, y'all. So we definitely didn't get to all of the questions and know that all of you probably have many, many more. So, Amy, how do you suggest people find resources like an in-person consultant or classes?
I think that most of the time, your delivery hospital, wherever you're choosing to deliver your baby, even if you're not in a hospital, your midwife even, should have some really good resources. On-staff lactation consultant in most hospitals that you'll have access to while you're inpatient there. But just look, really, major cities, very few private practice pediatricians have on-staff IBCLCs, but we're out there. Our population's growing. Social media is a good way to find IBCLCs. But as far as classes and access to sort of immediate care, it would be while you're in the hospital, or the hospital can even offer, prenatal classes and things like that.
That's so good. Okay, so jumping out of some of the kind of rapid fire practical questions, one category or topic we wanted to discuss with you is this idea of going back to work. Across the resources, the workbook that Rachel and I wrote in this podcast, we're advocates of, helping parents figure out the scenario that best works for them. And I know that this is different for a lot of different couples and families regarding who's working and how they're working and how that's structured. For us, Rachel has worked a lot with us having kids in some different environments, part-time or full-time, or taking seasons off of work, just depending on what we felt like was best for us and what was best for her, really. So any thoughts as moms go back to work in terms of nursing and breastfeeding and pumping and everything? Any practicals or advice or any encouragement that you'd have for them?
It's so funny how my advice, just in a matter of 6-7 months, has changed dramatically because of the pandemic. And us going back to work doesn't look like it used to, unless you're in that essential worker field. Most of moms that I'm interfacing with are actually returning to work in their living rooms or in their homes. And so I talk to moms all the time, more recently now, that say, hey, I never even did that bottle thing because, we were forced to stay home and now I'm just nursing. And so I think that, in finding some silver linings in the pandemic, I think that that's probably done some really amazing things for our breastfeeding rates as far as continuance, because these moms have just been home and just been able to nurse their babies. But for those of us that are going out and sort of having to juggle both, I think that it really depends on your schedule. The best advice to give would be to have a good place that you can express your milk, pumping sort of on your baby's feeding schedule when you're away from them. Make sure you know your rights as an employee and as a breastfeeding mom. You're protected under. There's a law that basically protects you for 12 months that says that you have the right to a private space that is not a bathroom, and the time that you need to get your milk out. So just sort of knowing that there's going to be a little bit of a shift when you go back to work, conscious and unconscious stress that you're going to have just being away from your baby. Milk supply can dip a little bit just because of that stress management, but it can certainly come up. But, stay on track, stay positive, nurse your baby when you get back home, and, get with your lactation consultant. They can help you sort of stay encouraged and stay positive, help you troubleshoot any kind of problems that come up.
That's good, because I think that's kind of when I fell off the wagon with Wells too, was trying to pump in my car, literally, just didn't go well for me. One just quick practical about pumping, you said to do it on your baby's feeding schedule. So just pump when you would nurse. And then how long should you pump on each side?
So I recommend double pumping, so both breasts at the same time on a high setting that's not painful, and I'd say 20-25 minutes, something
Okay.
like that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the moms listening out there, they make these like bra things that you can put your pump into so you don't have to hold the pumps, which can be really helpful. I've heard.
Hands-free bra. You could even make your own, like an old sports bra that we all have, that's in the
Oh,
bottom of
yeah.
the drawer. You just sort of mark nipples, spots on that, cut it, and then bam, there's your homemade hands-free bra.
There you go. Well, Amy, as a mom of two, what encouragement would you have for new parents listening?
Oh, seek your village wisely. Know that it takes a village to tackle problems if and when they come. Sometimes knowing everything about breastfeeding or whatever it isn't the best approach. In choosing your village, look for a lactation consultant. When you are looking for your pediatrician, ask for their opinions, their advice on breastfeeding, and if they have one on staff. The first week is the hardest, hands down. And I'm, over 8 years into parenthood, and I still sort of stick by that. The first week is really hard. Eat when you can, whenever you can, sleep when you can, accept help from your family and friends, get connected, stay talking to people, whether that be a support group or your best friend or your cousin or whoever. Even if you don't need support, maybe you can help be the supporter there, but just be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Love your babies.
That's so good. Amy, thanks so much for making time to talk to us. I know this is such a high need topic and you're so busy helping so many people with this. So really appreciate you making space to talk to Rachel and me, and really know that you're helping a lot of people that are listening to this podcast in something that's, I know, emotional and physical and can be trying and challenging, but beautiful and sweet as well. So thanks for making the time.
Thank you. I'm so honored to have been here with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening. We really hope that today's episode was helpful for all of you listening. If you want to follow along with Amy, get her milk tips, and be encouraged on your breastfeeding journey, check her out on Instagram at the handle at Ame Odom IBCLC. And Amy is spelled AME. Odom is ODOM, and we'll be sure to link her Instagram page in our show notes, so be sure to check that out. As always, action steps are, if you want to learn more and get more resources, check out our book, A Parent's Guide to a New Baby. It's at christianparenting.org. If you wouldn't mind, rate and review this podcast if it has been helpful to you, if it's been encouraging to you. Rating and reviewing it goes a really long way to help other new parents find it. We know that parenting a newborn is really hard, but we're here to help.